Hello, Moto.
The early 2000s, a time of transition and new beginnings. A new millennium had just started, bringing fresh ideas, new technologies, and a growing curiosity about what the future might look like. We went from clunky desktop towers to sleeker home PCs. Music became digital. DVDs completely replaced VHS. Gadgets were becoming more portable. The internet started creeping into our daily lives. It felt like the future was unfolding right in front of us gradually, but surely. Everything was moving forward at a steady pace. Better, faster, more connected, but still familiar. And then came the moment that would change everything. January 9th, 2007, Apple unveils the first iPhone, a device that went further than any mobile phone at the moment.
100 miles, we got the first look today at what Apple says is the next big thing.
A phone that, with its advanced capabilities, promised to reshape the world. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Big business, bumper sales, and giant profits. Apple, makers of the iPhone.
The iPhone changed everything. It redefined the mobile phone and turned it into the most essential device of our daily lives. The iPhone not only dominated the phone market in the next years, but completely transformed it, effectively leaving companies like BlackBerry and Nokia out of the run in their own markets. It is pretty clear, right? From the very beginning, Apple had the definitive concept of what a smartphone should be, a concept which still endures to this day. That precise moment back in 2007 was the turning point. The day Apple destroyed all other smartphone competitors. But what if I tell you, it was not really like that. Rather something that came shortly after, which completely changed the perception of what a phone was capable of, and took it way beyond the limits Apple had originally envisioned. Something that, although present before in other brands, Apple's way of doing it would soon prove to be the core of the modern smartphone experience. Not just a new feature, not just an upgrade, but the actual reason we live inside our phones today. Apple didn't introduce it in that moment, but it was inevitable. When Apple created the vision for what the iPhone should be and its role in the market, it was certainly innovative. A touchscreen interface that felt like magic, pinch to zoom, visual voicemail, full web pages in your pocket. Compared to what was out there at the time, it was from another planet. But that wasn't enough to transform an entire industry on its own. For all its elegance, the iPhone in 2007 was also surprisingly limited. You couldn't change much of anything. You couldn't even rearrange the icons, nor change the background. And it was exclusive for AT&T. Basically, what you bought is what you got. But nevertheless, after Apple's success with the iPod, it was obvious to many that the iPhone would be just as successful. And so, it was. On June 29th, 2007, it launched. In its first 2 days, it had sold more than 270,000 units. And by September of the same year, it had surpassed the million. And yet, Apple's idea of a smartphone wasn't what we think of today. The iPhone wasn't meant to be a playground for developers or a toolkit for creators. It was, above all else, an experience, curated, polished, and completely under Apple's control. At the time, Apple was in control of all the user's experience. Instead, they offered something they called the Suite Solution: web apps, websites designed to look and feel like mobile apps, running entirely inside the Safari browser. They loaded from the internet, had no access to the phone's hardware, and worked only when you were online. To Apple, this was a safe and clean approach. No downloads, no instability, no interference with the system. But while it made sense on paper, in practice, this solution felt more like a compromise. Web apps were slow, they lacked power, and compared to the iPhone's built-in software, they felt like shadows, echoes of what could have been. Still, Apple stood by the idea. The iPhone, in their mind, wasn't a platform, it was a product. and they had just spent years perfecting it. Letting outside developers into that world, it didn't align with Apple's philosophy at the time. They weren't trying to build a new ecosystem. They were trying to redefine the phone, and in that mission, they mostly succeeded. The iPhone looked better, worked smoother, and felt more futuristic than anything else out there. But in many ways, it still followed the same logic as its competitors. A set of fixed functions, a tool with clear boundaries, sleek, powerful, but limited. For all its polish and charm, something about the iPhone felt like it was hiding untapped potential. The hardware was clearly capable of more. A beautiful touchscreen, sensors, internet access, even location tracking. The iPhone wasn't just meant to be better than other phones of the time, but its hardware was destined to take things to another level, where no competing phone had yet reached. But under Apple's original plan, all of that was locked away. But many users weren't willing to settle. They knew the iPhone's potential went beyond Apple's limits, and it was only a matter of time until someone proved it. And then it happened. People started breaking in. At first, tools were released to break the iPhone's exclusive lock to AT&T, and soon jailbreaking appeared. A way to remove Apple's software restrictions and access the inner workings of the iPhone. At first, it was about freedom, changing your wallpaper, adding new ringtones, running simple tools, removing exclusivity to AT&T, but very quickly, it became something much bigger. Developers saw a blank canvas. They weren't just modifying the iPhone, they were imagining what it could be. Even before Apple allowed native apps, developers were already building them, unofficially. And this wasn't the first time. Hackers had long experimented with Apple's products. From the early Mac to the iPod, enthusiasts had found ways to bypass limitations and bend devices to their will. But this was different. The iPhone felt like a platform in waiting, and the jailbreaking community was treating it like one. The movement grew fast. Communities formed. Tutorials were shared. Innovation spread. Tools like Installer.app and Cydia appeared. Unofficial app stores for a phone that didn't yet have one. And through this underground ecosystem, a message started to emerge. One that Apple could no longer ignore. People wanted more. Not just web apps inside Safari, but real native apps, built specifically for the iPhone, taking full advantage of its hardware and design. At first, Apple resisted. They insisted that web apps were the best path forward, secure, stable, and safe for users. But behind the scenes, the conversation had started to change. They could see the demand, the creativity, the momentum, and Apple, for all its control, was also pragmatic. So, less than a year after the iPhone launched, they changed course. In March 2008, Apple introduced something that would alter the iPhone's destiny forever. The iPhone SDK, a full software development kit that allowed developers to build native apps. For the first time, Apple opened the door. And just a few months later, they opened the gate. The App Store, a single place where users could safely download apps, curated, controlled, but open to developers. If they played by Apple's rules, it was change in their compromise, a turning point, and a quiet admission that the iPhone was no longer just a product. It was a platform, and everything was about to change. And then finally, the App Store launched in July 2008, and it changed everything. For the first time, developers around the world could officially build software for the iPhone and reach millions of users instantly. Some were professionals, others were passionate enthusiasts, but they all had one thing in common: a unique vision for the iPhone. And so they did. The App Store was quickly flooded with a variety of apps, each one representing the developers' ideas of what the iPhone could be capable of.
Say you own a small business, and you need to ring up a customer's order. Well, there's an app for that. And you also need to print out a shipping label. There's an app for that. And then you need to check if it actually got there. There's an app for that too. Yep, there's an app for just about anything.
Some apps were practical: flashlights, calculators, voice recorders, tools the iPhone didn't include out of the box. Others brought the web to mobile, reimagining sites like Facebook, Twitter, and eBay for a handheld experience. And others were pure creativity: new games, music tools, painting apps, soundboards, 1,000 ideas, all converging in your pocket. The iPhone was no longer just a gadget. It was becoming a tool, an entertainment center, a personal assistant, whatever you wanted it to be. A window to the world, all in one small device. Your phone wasn't something you used occasionally anymore. It became part of your daily life. The App Store also introduced a new model. Developers could make money. Apps could be free or paid. Some included in-app purchases. Whatever the model, developers earned 70%, and Apple took 30%, a number that would later spark fierce debates. But at the time, few complained. The App Store exploded. Thousands of apps became tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. There were apps for everything: tools, news, weather, maps, photos, art, sleep language. And slowly, the iPhone transformed, became personal. It woke you up. It tracked your steps. It showed you your calendar. It captured your memories. The one object always within reach. Not just useful, but essential. Our phones' cameras turned experiences into content, and social media supercharged it. Instagram, Snapchat, Vine, apps built natively for mobile, not adapted from the web, designed to take full advantage of the iPhone's camera, sensors, and mobility. The way we communicated changed. The way we saw ourselves changed. Gaming found its place, too. A whole generation grew up, not with consoles or PCs, but with phones. Casual, simple, addictive, Angry Birds, Temple Run, Cut the Rope, Flappy Bird, games that became global sensations, and for many, a part of childhood. Even big names joined the movement. Rockstar released full 3D console ports like GTA, Chinatown Wars, and San Andreas. And it wasn't just games. Our culture began to center around mobile. Music, memes, viral videos, trends that spread like wildfire. Because now, the internet was always in your pocket. The phone wasn't just part of the moment, it was the moment. Owning a smartphone wasn't just helpful, it was necessary. A digital extension of yourself, always connected, always on. The App Store wasn't just a store. It was a new window to millions of iPhone users around the globe. And with it came something truly revolutionary. You now had the whole world, right in your pocket. Looking back, it's easy to forget just how bold the App Store was. When Apple launched the iPhone in 2007, it was already a huge leap. But in a different timeline, that could have been it. A sleek device, beautifully designed, but running only Apple's own software. No third-party apps, no indie developers, no ecosystem, just Apple. And for a while, that was the plan. Steve Jobs initially resisted opening the iPhone to outside developers. He was worried about security, quality, and control. But Apple was forced to take a decision that would change everything. They opened the gates. They didn't just allow third-party apps. They built an entire economy around them. They gave developers the same tools Apple used. They created a digital marketplace. They gave people a reason to keep using and upgrading their phones. This one decision didn't just define the iPhone, it defined the entire smartphone industry. Google saw the future and launched Android Market later known as Google Play. Samsung, Microsoft, BlackBerry all scrambled to launch their own app stores. The failure of the Windows Phone demonstrated us how absolutely essential third-party apps was for smartphones, and that it mattered little how capable the hardware was, or how good the software was. Without apps, it was nothing more than a limited and isolated gadget. It was not just about the phone anymore. It was about what your phone could become. Apps turned smartphones into customizable platforms, personal, powerful, and always evolving. Today, that's a given. But in 2008, that was not the case. Without the App Store, the iPhone might have been a brilliant device, but not a revolutionary one. It could have gone the way of the iPod, impressive but limited, popular but replaceable. Instead, it became something far more enduring, a platform, a foundation for ideas, a digital home for everything from billion-dollar businesses to silly soundboards made in a college dorm. In the end, the App Store wasn't just a feature. It was a new way of thinking, a belief that a phone could be more than a product. It could be a platform shaped by millions of creators. And that one belief reshaped our world